Okay, so today we'll see the pass one of two pass assembler. So as you know, the assembler is going to convert the assembly language instructions into the machine language code, right? But this process is divided into two phases or two passes. In the first pass, what we are going to do is we are going to scan the source program, that is our assembly language instructions, assembly language code, and then uh, we are going to generate a few data structures, which is the opcode table, the symbol table, the literal table, and the pool table, right? These are the four tables that we generate out of pass one. Now, this intermediate code which you store in the opcode table is now acting as an input to the pass 2, and then in pass 2 we will convert that intermediate code into the final machine language code which was required, right? So the latter part is left to pass 2. We'll firstly see the pass 1. Fine. I hope with this diagram it's clear what exactly we are trying to do, and what I want you all to concentrate on is this format in which we are going to read the statement. We are going to read a line from the input file. Okay, so you can see it in blue over here. Firstly, we'll have a label, then we'll have some opcode, and then we are having operand. So this operand can be two operands. So we are having another fourth thing that we are going to scan from the input document, that is operand 1 and operand 2. So four things at a time we can scan at max from the input document. Fine. Okay. So as I told, the assembly language code is going to, sorry, the assembly language code will be processed in pass 1, and it is going to prepare the machine, the machine opcode table, the symbol table, literal table, pool table, and obviously the intermediate code. Fine. Okay, we'll quickly go through the types of statements that are present in assembly language code, because we need to use this when we scan the assembly language code line by line. We will require this knowledge. Okay, so we'll quickly cover that. First type is imperative statements. These are executable statements like read, print, add, move r, move m. All these are imperative statements, right? So for representation of these imperative statements, we use is. Okay. Next, declarative statements. Declare space or declare a constant. So these are the two types of declarative statements, ds and dc. With ds, what happens is, if we declare a ds1, for example, as it is given here, so what it will do is it will reserve some space. uh, some means the whatever you have specified over here, and it's whatever you store at that memory location, that can be accessed with this variable a, or this symbol a, right? Simple. So whatever you specify here, whether it is 1, 2, 3, depending upon the architecture of your system, it will reserve that much space. For example, here it is considering one word of memory to be reserved. It may be one byte, one word, 32 bits. Likewise, whatever you specify, depends upon the system architecture. What you specify is one word, one byte, whatever it is. Okay. Here below down, we are specifying a constant which is having some value given in single quotes, that is 5, right? So this is how we declare constants in assembly language code. The third type of statement is assembler directive. So end and start are the two basic assembler directives, and then we have certain advanced assembler directives like uh, origin, ltorg, likewise. So not to mention, I think you all know start represents the start of your assembly language code, and the exact program at which uh, I mean the address at which the program assembly language instructions are present, that address is specified over here besides start. So from there, that is nothing but the memory location at which we are going to initialize our location counter, right? LC. Fine. Ltorg and origin. Origin we use generally to revise the location counter. So whatever we specify after origin, your location counter will point at that memory location, like what we did at start. The same thing, we can revise the location counter by using origin. Ltorg is important because ltorg basically what it does is, if you have certain literals present in your literal table, so if I encounter a literal, I will store it into the literal table. But in the literal table, I have two columns, right? One is for the literal itself, and the other one is for the address of that literal, right? Then, if I encounter a literal, I will store it into the literal table, but I will not enter the address of that literal because I don't know the address. The moment I encounter a ltorg instruction in my assembly language code, then I will, whatever is the current content of location counter, that address I will store in my literal table for the given literals which were having no addresses. Understood? So, for example, I had two literals in my literal table equal to 10 and equal to 5, right? For which addresses were not present. And when I encountered ltorg, the location counter was 205, for example. So what I'll do, in the address field for equal to 10, I will write 205, and in the address field of equal to 5, I will write 206. I will increment the location counter by 1, and I will write the address accordingly. Understood? So that is the use of ltorg. Another thing, apart from updating the literal table by adding the addresses, another task that we have to do when we encounter ltorg is that we have to update the pool table. So if you encounter a ltorg, then you understand that the literals which were declared or which were used before this ltorg are from a different pool, and the literals which are going to be used after this ltorg will belong to a different pool. So you have to make the entry into the pool table accordingly, right? So whenever you encounter a ltorg, whatever is the current index of the literal table, that has to be stored into the pool table, right? For example, I had three literals in my literal table. Then what I will do is I will write, so since I have three literals in my literal table, that means obviously the new pool of literals will be added from which index? From the fourth index, right? So I will write 4 into my pool table. Understood? Once I encounter ltorg. Again, when I encounter ltorg, for example, I had another two literals in my literal table. So now the next index is 6, right? So I'll write 6 in my pool table. Likewise. So these two things you have to do when we encounter ltorg. Number one, update the addresses in the literal table and update the pool table. Remember this thing. Okay. These were the types of statements. Now, for seeing the implementation of pass 1 of our assembler, we'll consider this assembly language code, small one. Okay, and we'll see how to build the code for this. Okay, so what we will do is we will scan this code line by line, and firstly we'll look into, if we scan this code line by line, we will firstly tokenize that line. For example, look at the third line, this one. So we'll scan this line from the input file, and then we'll tokenize this line uh, into different tokens on basis of what? On basis of tab, right? So the splitting element for us will be what? Will be tab, because two tokens are separated over here with a tab. You can consider space, you can consider comma as well, right? But you need to mention a comma after every token in that case, in the input file. So I have considered a tab. So in Java we have the split function. So I will use the split function for this particular line, and to the split function I have to specify on what basis I have to split. So I will specify slash t, right? If I specify slash t, then after a tab is encountered, whatever is scanned up to that point of time, that is stored as an array. So likewise, how many tokens I will have in the number one? wherever I found that A, corresponding to that A, I will note down the address. What address? Whatever is the current LC, I will write the value of LC as the address for this A in the symbol table, right? If I found that the first element in my tokenized array is imperative statement, then I know imperative statement will have two operands. It will definitely have two operands. So accordingly, I will deal with them. Understood the way we are going to work? We are firstly going to take up one line at a time, and then we are going to split that line into columns. And depending upon the first column, we are going to make the decisions. Okay, in short. Fine. Any doubt? Any difficulty up till now? Anyone? Yeah. So let us see the implementation part quickly. What all data structures we require for pass one. So number one, we'll require a variable to store or to maintain the location counter LC. So one variable we'll take. Next, we require some hash maps. Now, why we require this hash map? Simply because uh, we are maintaining different mnemonics in different hash map. For example, these uh, declarative statements DS and DC we are storing in a hash map, and you know that in a hash map what we store key value pairs, right? So for the DS as the key, we have a corresponding value as 1, which we will write in the opcode table, right? For that we are taking this hash map. Similarly, if DC is the key, the value is 2. Understood? So whenever we encounter a DS in the intermediate code, we'll write a 1, right? DL comma 1. If we encounter DC with one of the statements of the in the intermediate code, what we will write? DL comma 2. For that purpose, we will require this hash map. Similarly, for mnemonics, for the imperative statement mnemonic, we have a separate hash map. I have hash map var 1 or our hash map var corresponding 1. We write a separate for again instruction value hash map. Got to know? Similarly, we have one another hash map. I'm going to open it now. Var hash map var instruction hash map. And wait, a variable with the LC we can use util. Fine. When another hash map is required to store the registers, so which values I am assigning to the registers is 31323334. You can take up any value. You can also take 1234. Depends upon what exactly you want to use or what format you want to follow. So I stored all the register names A reg, B reg, C reg, D reg as the key and their corresponding values in the hash map. Okay. Okay. Now what output tables I would generate, I need to store those tables in some data structure. So what I have chosen is I will store the symbols in a hash map. So the symbol table is now prepared as a hash map. Okay. And also the literal table, which is having only two columns. Symbol table is also having two columns, right? So I will prepare the symbol table hash map and the literal table hash map, and in that what I am going to add is the literal itself and that will act as the key for the hash map, and their corresponding value will be the address of that literal. Similarly, in symbol, the symbol will be the key and its corresponding address will be the value for that key. Understood? So this way. Another output table that we need to maintain is the opcode table, right? In which we are storing the intermediate code, isn't it? So for now we are considering the opcode is a matrix, is a two-dimensional array. Why two-dimensional array? I'll clarify that. Here I have defined the dimensions for the two-dimensional array of opcode as 10 and 4. Why 10? Because I'm considering I'm going to generate the opcode or the intermediate code uh, for 10 statements in the assembly language code. So I'm considering my assembly language code is having 10 instructions for which intermediate code will be generated. That's why I've taken 10 over here, right? And for each instruction in the intermediate code, how many maximum columns I can have? I can have 4 columns, right? One for the label, one for the mnemonic itself, one for first operand, and one for storing the second operand, right? I mean the intermediate codes of the label, uh, sorry, the mnemonic, the operand 1 and operand 2. I'll store the intermediate code for all of these in the opcode table, and the zeroth column I will utilize to store the mnemonic itself. Okay, you can see the format over here so that things become more clear. So literal table, I am having the literal itself and the address, so I'm using hashmap to store this literal table. Similarly, I'm using hashmap to store the symbol table, the symbol itself and the address of that symbol. Fine. In the opcode table, you can see over here, I am storing the mnemonic itself, the class of that mnemonic in the second column, the operand 1 opcode in the second column, and operand two's opcode in the third column. Understood? So altogether, how many columns do I require? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. And that is why we had specified 4 over here for the opcode table data structure. Understood? Any doubt in any of the data structures by far? Clear to all? Yeah. Okay. Fine. Now we'll start with the stepwise how we are going to build the output tables. We'll discuss that. Okay. Programmatically how to do it. So firstly, as a first step, what we will do is we will initialize all the data structure. That means whatever hash maps we took, we will initialize the hash maps by using the put method and putting all the relevant key value pairs in each of the hash maps, right? So we have initialized all the data structure, and this line count is used uh, to maintain the count of how many lines we have scanned from the input file. Okay, why we are using this? Uh, finally, I mean, we will store. Here you can see for the intermediate code that we are going to write for each of the assembly language instruction. This row value will be equal to the current line count. Understood? So that is why we need to maintain the line count always. Fine. So that is initialized to 0 firstly, and then we will read the input file line by line. Fine. Suppose I read the line in a string variable. Again, we know how to read the line in Java. We'll use the buffered reader class, and the I mean, we can use the buffered reader with the reader class, and we can scan the text character by character, and we'll store that text in a variable, in a string variable, that is this line. For example, I have taken a variable line and I'm splitting that line based on what? Based on tab. So I've specified a slash t. Now, whatever we discussed after this line is tokenized, all the four tokens or whatever number of tokens we have, those tokens will be stored in a array split words. So I forgot to put the array symbol, the square brackets, but this is a string array split words which is going to store all the four, two, three, four, whatever tokens will be generated. Clear? Next, now firstly we'll check whether the line count is zero or not. If the line count is zero, then definitely whatever we have scanned as the line, that has to be what? That has to be a start statement, isn't it? So that is where we are going to initialize our location counter at this condition, and this condition is only going to be true once for when we scan the first line. Next, when we scan the second line from our input code, then obviously this condition won't get satisfied, and we'll always explore the else part of this if uh, next iteration onwards, right? So if the line count is 0, what we will do is we will initialize location counter LC variable with split words 1. Now what is this split words 1? Let us go back. Okay, I have the code over here. Yeah. So if I have scanned this first line, start, okay. Now split words of 0 is start and split words of 1 is what? This 200. So I'm initializing my location counter with this 200, isn't it? Okay. Next, I have to generate an intermediate code for this start statement, right? So in the opcode matrix, in the zeroth row, why zeroth? Because line count is currently 0. In the zeroth row of the opcode matrix and in the zeroth column, what I will write? Start itself, because you know what format we are following. Over here you can see the mnemonic, the class of it, and if there is any operand we will write the opcode for that operand, right? So as the zeroth column we are storing start, so where start is present at the zeroth index of split words array, so we store that. And in the same row of my opcode table, in the first column what I store? AD comma 1. Why? Because the intermediate code for start is what? AD comma 1. So you can imagine here in the class column it would have been what? AD comma 1 over here. Here it would have been start and here it was AD comma 1. Understood how we are going ahead? Yeah. So you can directly write here statically AD comma 1, or what you can do is we have a hash map in which uh, from where we can fetch the appropriate code of 1, isn't it? So what I would have done, I would have got where we have checked whether it is null or not, right? In the else part we checked it first. So there that A was stored in the symbol table. We are checking for DS and we are storing the class and the info. Now what is that info? The C comma, actually it should be, yeah, right, C comma 2, right? What does this 2 specify? This 2 has come from here, two spaces or two words we want to reserve. So this C comma 2 is because of that. So we are trying to store the same over here. See here, add DL comma 1 or DL comma 2 to opcode table in the first column. If it is DC, we'll add DL comma 1. If it is DS, we'll add DL comma 2. You can add it statically like we did for start. And in the second column of our opcode table, C comma, whatever we have found at the split words of 2. What was split words of 2? This 2, the third token, the second token, whatever we have got, that we'll write over here you can see that C comma that. And then obviously we have to add the split words of 2 to the location counter, because the location counter is incremented by those many words, right? Whatever we mentioned there. Not to forget, you have to, this is a string, right? So you have to parse it into an integer and then add it to the location counter. Okay, fine. And the last possibility, we saw, if it is a imperative statement, how to process it. If it is a declarative statement, how to process it. Last possibility is if it is a assembler directive, right? So in the last else if, we are going to check whether it is a assembler directive or not. Assembler directive, that too, it can be end, origin or LTorque. It can't be start, because if it was start, it would have gone into the very first condition, that is if condition, right over here. If it was start, it would have been processed here itself. So if any of the declarative statement is encountered, that has to be a end, origin or a LTorque. So we are checking if split words of 1 belongs to the declarative statements hash map. If yes, if this is true, then we have to process it accordingly. How do we process it? We simply add in the 0th column of our opcode table, we'll add uh, the split words of 1. Like over here you can see we have added end, or we have added LTorque, and we'll add AD comma 2, AD comma 3 or AD comma 4, depends upon what. You can use a if else if statements, and you can check whatever it is and you can add it statically in the 0th column like we have done over here, AD comma 4 or AD comma 2. Understood? But if it is LTorque, in that case we know what we have to do. So whatever literals are there in the literal table whose address was 999, will update their address, right? And what we will put as address? The current LC, whatever is the value of current LC, that will be put as address in the literal table, right? If it is LTorque. So in the same condition where we are putting AD comma 4 for LTorque, there itself we can perform this task. And the other task, to update the pool table, that also has to be done in the